Kate Filchi wrote, Izedo Biha, 1,000 welcomes to the Village Oak Tree for March 6, 2024. My name's Terrence O'Donnell, and I'm returning again to your village this week to talk about the Palestinians and other people like them around the world. But first, I want to explain why I'm doing this. I think this is a bit overdue. I spent the majority of my working adult years as a sailor and soldier for the U.S. government. And all those years of multiple deployments to a lot of countries around the world, I finally woke up after my last deployment to Afghanistan in 2002 with the U.S. Army. This was my 5th deployment to the Middle East out of 8 total deployments in my military career, spanning across 30 years of my life. I learned about how resilient a people can be in the face of generations of adversity and how caring they can be with one another and outsiders, as long as the outsiders don't behave like colonizers and conquerors. All that fear-mongering about different peoples is misplaced. There are bad people over in the Middle East, just like there are in the West. But the regular, everyday people who go to market and raise their kids are a little different than any of the rest of us. After my military career was over, I was very unhappy because now I could see all the hypocrisy in the civilized Western countries, especially the United States, and I've been an activist ever since. My activism came at a personal cost, though. But I feel it was worth my sacrifice to be comfortable with myself after what I'd seen and been involved with. So I want to tell the truth about what's going on around the world. The truth about the true cost to all of us who aren't members of the elite rich people's clubs. These days, I read a lot of overseas media rather than U.S. news feeds and Substack journalists such as Tom Hartman, Chris Hedges, and others. I'll probably add more to that list as I discover more truths. There's no such thing as freedom of the press in the West anymore, as I told everyone last week. So independent journalism is the best way to find the truth of what is actually going on around the world. I'm just another voice among hundreds who is trying to wake the world up to what kind of big trouble we are in from man-created climate change, wars over greed, and power struggles, and so on. The problem is, not enough people see what's coming. The disinformation campaigns are ginormous. My job here once a week is to be one among the many, voicing a wake-up call to anyone who will listen, that the world is in trouble. That's the purpose of this podcast, to wake people up as to why bad things are happening and what maybe if enough of us make a lot of noise over media, people will start to listen and do more to fight the greedy robber barons and politicians for a decent life. So now that you know a little bit about me and my purpose here, let's delve into today's topic. I want to bring your attention back to Gaza again, as I mentioned. The news media has been all over the story last week about the refugees being shot by IDF soldiers while queuing up for food at an aid truck. Over 100 were killed and many more wounded. Add this to over 100,000 dead and wounded now by the IDF and the Israeli government, with the U.S. and Germany sending in more military supplies to the Israeli government in their cries of defending themselves. As I mentioned before, any ceasefire won't happen until the U.S. brokers a deal in their favor. There is something shaking loose finally, so the news media tells us, but the details are not being published yet. Well, they haven't even sat down to do anything yet. But for those of us who supported Palestine from the beginning, it's a day late and a dollar short for them. If history is any teacher, we should know that whatever ceasefire agreement's made, the U.S. will try to find a way to come out on top. That's the American way. So what if Hamas and Israel do come out some sort of an agreement? Israel will want Gaza emptied out and likely the West Bank as well. They will push for resettlement of all the refugees, or should we say survivors, to another country, any country, just as long as it isn't Palestine. The Arab world has already vetoed that, as no one has the capacity to take care of so many displaced people. They've already told the world this. From Egypt, Lebanon, and Jordan, whom have been caring for Palestine refugees for a while now, to Saudi Arabia and beyond. This is probably where the U.S. will come in. They will convince the Europeans that the West needs to come together and offer to take care of these displaced Palestinians to whomever will take them in. Same old story. Provide billions in humanitarian aid to set up the refugees in ugly camps, bring in some food and tents, then forget about them, like so many others in the past. Meanwhile, with the Palestinians removed from Gaza and probably the West Bank, Israel will gobble up all of that unoccupied real estate and turn it all into a global oil well. Israel will lease the land and use rights to Western global fossil fuel companies who are all ready to swoop in and set up all their drilling rigs to make the place even more uninhabitable. Israel will get its foreign investment funding to build the new Ben Gurion Canal on the dividing line between North and South Gaza, or where Gaza used to be. Saudis will look the other way because they stand to benefit from this big canal as well. In a few years, Gaza will be just another note in history books if we let it. With all of that going on, any Palestinians in the West Bank will be given their eviction notices by Israel while the West looks on, and there will be another wave of displaced refugees looking for a place to call home. Bedouins have a better life than these displaced refugees forced into these camps. I visited U.S. and UN refugee camps in Afghanistan years ago, and from the looks of the photos and videos we have now, they haven't changed much in 20 years. These displaced peoples are forced into little tent cities, dependent on the aid agencies for their lives. Food and shelter and water when they can get it. Meanwhile, the tents don't offer much shelter from the weather, whether it's scorching hot in the summer months or freezing in the cold months. With nowhere else to go, this is on purpose, these refugees are forced to live in these refugee camps for years, such as the one in Jordan I read about a month or so ago. Some of them folks have been there for years. They're setting up camps across the border in Egypt right now in expectation of these refugees coming. So how is this any kind of life? Always being dependent on a country's charity or the UN aid groups. With the UN, their aid is largely dependent on whether it's safe enough to deliver any aid to the camps. If there's conflict, they won't come, such as what we're seeing going on in Gaza right now. Also in Sudan, in the conflict regions, and so many other places. The peacekeeping troops are few and far between, with Ireland making up a lion's share these days. If the U.S. elections and some of the European ones go to the right this year, all that political landscape will change. The U.S. Republican candidate has already promised to cut back or leave NATO altogether. Like any aid for the UN will be drastically cut if taken away altogether. Some right-wing European parties want to consolidate their spending as well. They all want to close up shop and keep their money at home, taking care of their own and no one else. So what happens to these refugee camps if that happens? Doesn't take too much imagination to know what will happen. Food, water, and other aid will dry up as the host countries won't have the finances to take care of these refugee camps on their own. A lot of people will die of hunger, thirst, malnourishment, disease, and violence. For people like Donald Trump and his hardcore followers, they're fine with that. No skin off their noses. They'll concentrate their attention on their own borders to keep out all their unwanted refugees. And a lot of other European countries will follow the example of the U.S. Some of them already are doing it. Some say this will lead to another global war. Some say not. Who knows? The bottom line is this. What's the world to do with all these displaced peoples? And is the West just going to ignore them and tell everyone else, anyone who asks? Refugees are none of our business. And this country's doing that now also. If enough displaced people get together and decide that the world owes them their basic needs, and they decide to take it, that could start a global conflict. We are nowhere near that yet, but it isn't too hard to see it coming. With climate change bearing down on the middle latitudes of the planet, a lot more displaced refugees will be looking to survive somewhere else. Right now, it's about Gaza, Sudan, Libya, Tunisia, Congo, Kenya, and so many other little countries like them. The violence could be stopped if the right plans were implemented, but no one seems to be really interested. Anyone who says they want to help is only thinking about their bottom line. The U.S. and their European colonizing counterparts never do anything for anyone unless there's something substantial in it for them, such as mineral rights or some other commodities a country may have that the West wants. China's right there with them. They have their Silk Road program that's just a shell game. They loan a country money, then move in with favorable trade negotiations, deep sea ports, and other infrastructure projects they loan money for, and mineral rights. They aren't any better than the West when it comes to exploiting a country's resources. So where does that leave the Palestinians? Well, between a rock and a hard place, that's where. Israel will get their way eventually with help from their Western partners in crime. the displacement of all the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank will eventually happen. The war crimes claims with the ICJ will die out in a few years, despite over 50 countries signing on and counting. The U.S. will see to that. Remember, they cannot be held accountable in the World Court. They own a large veto in the UN. Israel will continue to do what they're doing under the watchful eye of the Americans, British, and Western Europe. Mostly because there's a lot of investment money on the line here. Keep your eye on the ball. That ball is the vast oil fields under Gaza and off the coast, and the Ben Gurion Canal has yet to be built. And the Palestinians can't be allowed to have any say in any of that. Imagine if the Palestinians had their own state and could dictate the sale and leasing of all that wealth underneath them. The Saudis and OPEC would welcome them with open arms, crying out, "Akhi, brother." The West would crap their pants if that happened. It would dramatically change the political landscape of the Middle East, and they can't have that. The Israelis would fade away into a second-tier country, and again, the West can't allow that to happen. So the West wrings their hands, cries aloud about the obvious ethnic cleansing going on, but do little beyond that right now. Well, that's starting to change. So, a lot of things have happened since I wrote some of this stuff. Hamas is now in Cairo, Egypt for talks about a ceasefire that the U.S. helped broker. As I said before, if the U.S. is involved, there's something in it for them. Israel loves being the top dog over there, something they have been working on for over 100 years. They're standing in a world that is largely tarnished now, especially with this latest news that the IDF is targeting crowds of what few and aid trucks are getting through. Almost as if Israel is using them as bait. There was another small massacre at another aid truck last Sunday. There will probably be more as the desperately hungry Palestinians crowd the trucks out of near famine-like hunger. It's like shooting ducks in a barrel for the IDF. So how is this not genocide? How is this not ethnic cleansing? It doesn't matter, though, as the Israelis are getting away with it for now. No one wants to actually step up and stop them. Instead, Hamas leadership goes to posh hotels in Cairo to meet with world leaders about a possible ceasefire. From past history, this will likely take weeks while the hapless Palestinians die by the hundreds from the bombings, tanks, and IDF infantry shooting them as if they were at a county fair. Bonus points for children. More bonus points if they're 5 years and younger. The Palestinians don't have enough time to wait out the complicated ceasefire negotiations. By the time the Israelis decide to actually sit down to talk, their agenda will largely be accomplished. Ethnic cleansing by their military with munitions and slowly starving them to death. It's only a matter of a few weeks before the starving Palestinians will do anything for relief, such as forced relocation for food and shelter in the Sinai, for instance. How many will die in the meantime? How many more hundreds have to die before the rest of the world steps in to stop the madness? As I said, over 50 countries have petitioned the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, to order Israel to stop and step back so the Palestinians can get the relief they need. But because the U.S., Britain, and Germany are not on board with that, they are powerless to do much on their own. The ICJ will act slow or not at all, while the helpless Palestinians in Gaza will slowly starve to death. Just to throw some more shade at the U.S., they're doing airdrops of food in Gaza now. It's helping a tiny bit, but these drops are nowhere near the amount they need. And it won't be long before the opportunists decide to gather up all that dropped food and water to sell back to the poor and desperate at gangland prices. That's human nature. Whenever there is something of value available for free, gangsters always stepped in, used force to control the flow of goods to profit off the misery. So I'm going to take a break right now while you listen to my public service announcement, and I'll be back in a minute. I want to take a minute to tell any veterans out there who may be watching or listening to this show, or a dependent who may be living with a veteran who may be struggling, but they don't want to reach out because of the stigma attached. I will tell you that I have been there, and I struggled for a few years before I was more or less forced into seeking help from a local veterans center. It changed my life. Not before I lost another family, but at least I didn't end up on the street or in jail, which I came close to. Look at the posters I have showing and take down the numbers shown. 988, then press 1. Text 838-255. Or go to veteranscrisisline.net/chat to talk to someone. It's all confidential, and they're open 24/7. Whatever's going on with you, they can help. I know that the counselors I reached out to gave me my life back. Someone here can do the same for you or your loved one. Help is just one phone call, text, or chat away. If someone needs help, don't hesitate any longer. Make the call that could save someone's life. Welcome back. The airdrops make for good PR in the Western world, and good PR for Joe Biden in his election year, maybe. But the supplies will largely end up in the hands of bad people, and more people will starve. Of course, the Western news media won't print a word of that. It might make the U.S. look bad. Al Jazeera will print this stuff, but how many Western cable TV mainstream news media outfits will print stuff like this? Definitely not Fox News, CNN, or the New York Times. Likely not CBS, NBC, or ABC either. British news is staying away from all that as well. We won't see too many stories like these in the BBC or The Guardian or other non-independent news media either. It's as if the Western world just wants it all to go away. They're okay with burying their collective heads in the sand so they don't have to listen to the cries of the wounded and hear about the dead women and children. Look the other way as IDF soldiers shoot desperate men, women, and children just trying to get a little food and clean water. Shoot babies in the head for target practice or treat it like a video game because the Palestinians are so easy to kill. I bet these IDF Army reservists wouldn't stand up too long against a real army that shoots back at them with the same level of equipment they have. It's too bad there isn't one willing to stand up for Palestine. Israel will never completely defeat Hamas or Hezbollah, and they know it. So they're taking it out on the poor, ordinary people of Gaza and the West Bank. So much for Muslim Brotherhood. Everyone is afraid of a global war, so they sit back and watch with horror. I wonder how many IDF casualties there are after 5 months of fighting Hamas. Seems the casualty reports have largely stopped now. So I wonder why. What happened to the mighty Israeli army? They were going to wipe out Hamas so quickly, they boasted back in October and November. Now the IDF seems to be only good at killing unarmed civilians, men, women, and children, raping women, and torturing people just because they're Palestinians. This is not a disciplined military. These are just thugs in uniform given carte blanche to do as they please. Open season on hapless people with no accountability. It's no wonder they're losing this war. And they are, mark my words. They'll end up losing at some point down the road, whether it be by the court of world public opinion or the Arab world finally decides that enough is enough. Most likely it will be by sanctions from saner countries other than the U.S., Britain, and Germany. Until that happens, though, more innocent Palestinians are going to die. The worst will be by slow starvation, mostly the children. And this is happening as we speak. This is, the Palestinians will lose whole generations of people before the dust settles in Gaza. It is doubtful that they will ever recover from all of this in several lifetimes. It most definitely will never be forgotten, much like the last Nakba from 1948. This is what unfettered capitalism looks like on a global level. The richest countries standing by to scrape up the leftovers after something like this, or standing in line, jockeying for head-of-the-line privileges as they wait for the rewards to be doled out for being the most loyal supporter. Gaza isn't the only country this is happening to. Several African countries are going through this now as well. Small fights are going on everywhere over who is in charge and resources. Myanmar, for instance, Papua New Guinea. Pakistan is in turmoil over who's in charge there. Haiti's in full chaos. A handful of Central and South American countries are getting greedy and making aggressive moves. Venezuela and Guyana, for instance. The United States can't police them all. They have enough problems about who is in charge there as well. Canada and Australia and Britain are all having their government issues over who's in charge. China is also having some grumblings going on about their economic situation. Nearly all this can be blamed on greedy capitalists who were allowed to run amok unregulated. This issue is not just an American thing. It's rampant across the world. This is what the civilized world has come down to. Whomever has the most money has the most power. They're all fighting to acquire as much money and power as they can, like an addiction. Seems the whole civilized world needs to go to addiction rehab. Maybe some pharma corporation will find a magic pill for that someday. Now, wait, now they won't do that, as the pharma execs are addicted too. All of us average Joes around the world who are watching these horror shows can do is continue to protest this collective insanity as best we can in our own way. If you're a young person and don't mind joining a protest march, go for it. Keep it up. For those of us who are a little older now, we can use other methods to protest all these atrocities around the world, such as this podcast and many others like it. Stand up for the little people as best we can. Maybe someday everyone will get a fair shake. Now, I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime, but maybe someday. So I want to close this protest out with two poems I found by writers who are also protesting all this insanity in their own way. My first poem is entitled, I Am Her Son, But I Am an Orphan. Who'll Save Me? By Mariana Bosarava from Bulgaria. She is my mother. I am her only child. She is here, but I am an orphan. All say she's gorgeous, devilishly lovely. In red, she's painted the color of blood. In gray, she's painted the color of smoke. In black, she's painted the color of death. I am so small and fragile, she doesn't notice me. I'm so sick, she doesn't care. But I won't die. I'm immortal. I feel the pain. So many wounds. I taste the blood. Its taste is metallic and bitter. I'm so vulnerable. She doesn't care again. She gave me my name and then abandoned me. I'm so sick. I'm so lonely. I am not deaf. I hear the screams. I am not blind. I see the victims. So many worship her. So many think she's gorgeous. They don't see me. I'm so small. I'm so sick. They try to kill me, but I am immortal. I am peace, the son of war. Until she's here, I'll be next to her. I am her son, but I am an orphan. I live in pain. Who'll save me? I writhe in pain with every wounded child. I die with every bleeding person. I grieve with every grieving one. Please help me to grow up, because I am her son, but I am an orphan. My next one is entitled Seeking Peace by Dave V. And he writes a note here. In Seeking Peace, I delve into the heart-wrenching realities of conflict in Gaza, drawing from minimalist Zen poetry to express a deep yearning for peace amid tragedy. Through evocative imagery, I paint a scene of a land steeped in history yet scarred by ongoing strife, where the natural beauty and cultural depth are overshadowed by the profound loss of life. This poem is my introspective journey through the layers of grief and hope, aiming to cover a universal truth about our shared human condition and the relentless pursuit of peace. In the shadow of ancient stones, breaths are caught in the web of conflict, where olive trees weep, their roots soaked in the blood of endless sorrow. A land cradled by history's hands whispers the tales of lost sons and daughters, echoing through the heart of Gaza, a cry for peace in the midst of despair. The sky, once a canvas of celestial beauty, now mirrors the scars of relentless strife, each star a silent witness to the tears that water the earth barren from grief. In the quiet between the wails of mourning, a space for contemplation, for understanding, where souls entwined in pain and loss might find a bridge over tumultuous waters. Here, in the simplicity of existence, amidst the ruins of what was and the hope of what could be, lies the profound truth of our shared humanity. In the gentle whisper of the wind, a reminder that peace begins not with a declaration, but within the quiet depths of every heart, a single step on a path winding and long, toward a horizon where the sun rises on a day free from the shadows of sorrow. For in the silence of a moment, beneath the vast, indifferent sky, we find the courage to let go of anger, to sow the seeds of peace in the soil of despair, and watch as life, tender and resilient, sprouts from the ashes of conflict, a testament to the strength of the human spirit, ever seeking, ever striving for peace. So that's all I have for everyone this week. I hope I've given you who watch or listen to this something to think about as you go about the rest of your week ahead. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed it and you'll return again for another episode of the Village Oak Tree. Please share this podcast with your friends and relations. The more you share, the more we can convince enough people to make the world a better place to live in. This is Shauna Kay. I hope you'll continue to let me travel to your village to bring you some news from the world outside that might make you think a little after we part for the day. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. May the saddest day of your future be no worse than the happiest day of your past. Slán go fóill, which means goodbye for now in Irish.